first of all, congratulations on this series because I was intrigued by the trailer, but upon actually watching it, it so far surpassed any expectations that I had. I was just blown away. I was like, I found a gem. So genuinely, it's not just the
Oh,
opening line. Genuinely, congratulations.
oh, thank you. No, I do keep telling people that, like, 'cause we've had a lot of response from the trailer, and people have been going, "Oh, it's great." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the show is better than the trailer. It's fine, like there's so much more."
My Brilliant Career is a spirited romantic period piece. And as a quick icebreaker question that will also be a segue into us talking more in depth about the series, as a fan of one of Australia's greatest romantic storytellers of today, and especially insofar as period pieces go, I have to ask you, what is your favorite Baz Luhrmann project?
Oh, that's easy. It's Romeo and Juliet.
So good. And that's my favorite Shakespeare play. So I
Yeah.
asked this question because I've studied a fair bit about how he adapts and interprets classic art and history to reimagine those works into a version that is accessible to a modern audience. And I would argue that your version of My Brilliant Career does something similar for the original book of the same name, which was released a bit over a century ago. So, what sort of modifications did you prioritize when adapting the material so that it would be better understood and resonant for a 21st century audience?
Oh, thank you. Great question. Um, well, the thing I started when I reread the book was because there's a lot was basically two questions. Um, who else was living in Australia at that time who aren't in the book, but who were there? And then my second wasn't really a question. It was much more, how do I, as a person in then it was 2020, respond to these stories. So, for the first instance, it was obviously First Nation characters, um, gay people, and or just women of a certain kind of spirit, which are in the book. Um, and also Chinese people. We have a huge Australian Chinese population. We have a big Chinese history, and that all those elements were kind of just not in the book, which is suitable for the period it was written in. It makes sense for the period it was written in, but when you look at it now and you think we're showing this to a contemporary audience, how do we show this? So one of the very first things that in my mind, and it was from the very beginning of development, was making Harry Beecham have a Chinese mother. And I think that gave him more complexity as a character and more vulnerability. In the book, he's very kind of white landowner, colonial squattocracy and he's just kind of like this bloke. We were looking for this idea of why would Sibylla fall in love with this guy? He's not that interesting in the book. Giving him that background gave him this vulnerability within the society that matched hers and gave them a really strong spiritual connection. So that was the first one. The First Nations inclusion is obvious. It took us a long time to find the right balance for those stories. We had writers' rooms. We do them like different for a different podcast. We do it differently in Australia, but we had a writers' room that always involved First Nations writers and some amazing like people who I love and respect, writers and elders in that community. But still, it took us a long time to find the balance of those stories, and eventually we decided, well, they're the same. We have to see those stories under the umbrella of love versus career, which is the way that we're looking at Sibylla's story. And once we did that, then I think we found the key to telling those stories. The other thing genuinely came from me reading the book and having a reaction as a contemporary person. Things like changing. Harry has two elderly aunts in the book. And I've always been really fascinated by that early feminism movement in Australia and in the rest of the world, but how it is particular to our country. And so, in that sense, Aunt Augusta, we made those two characters into one person, made her a suffragette and a bohemian, and someone who sort of traveled and lived through the world and had found herself back in this small country town because of her obligation to her nephew. I feel that was a very long answer to a question,
You
but
know what's
that was how we
incredible about
approached
that
it.
answer? I think you might have answered at least three or four other questions that I had written down, and now I don't have to ask them because you already gave me the material, and I'm grateful for that. So
Happy to oblige.
elaborating a bit on, because one of the most moving parts for me was the indigenous characters. I mean, I think I almost had a breakdown when the bit with the feather happened. So I like
Oh my God,
that
right?
was a real moment for me as a romance girly. But I was interested in how much extra research you did into the history specifically insofar as it applies to Indigenous people in Australia. I'm familiar with the Stolen Generations because of Baz Luhrmann's work. So that was the introduction to that history for
Interesting.
me. But then I was
In
going, I
Australia.
think that might have been slightly after when the show was set. So it was a little different. And also, I had about a day and a half to prep for this. So I was curious about how much of that was just about hiring Indigenous people versus actually going and digging into literature and history and research.
Look, it's a combination of both. I think as an Australian person, you this is a long and complicated history which we grapple with every single day. So as someone, I've actually worked on quite a lot of First Nations based projects and have a lot of really close friends who are First Nations people within the film and television industry, and I've had personally a lot of conversations about this stuff. And then we had as I was saying before, we had incredible First Nations collaborators in our writers' room who were fully informed with their own history. And we also did outside research, spoke to academics and other First Nations people who'd written books about that particular period, because there's a lot in that particular period that we weren't necessarily super familiar with. And actually, to be honest, I think in the early days, the research fed into the story and made it too didactic. One of the great kind of discoveries that we made, though, which was fun, because there's a lot of trauma, like that backstory, the story of Aboriginal people at that time. There's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of displacement, there's a lot of um, all of that sort of history that comes with First Nations people. The one positive thing, and not the only one, but the one thing we found was this really strong history of Australian stock women. So these were Aboriginal women who worked as stock women, stock men, who worked with horses, who worked with cattle and sheep, and who worked on these farms, the sort of colonial farms. That was obviously the discovery that informed Nell as a character and gave us this really strong, great horsewoman character who we adore. But then again, it's that thing of like, the history of First Nations people in Australia is full of trauma. And so we had to make a really big decision on tone and genre with this story. And so that was that secondary decision that we made. We went down a lot of paths. We went down a lot of paths over our 5-year development period. We ended up with this script where these two stories were completely different, where Sibylla had her story and then the First Nations story was like two different shows. And so we were like, how do we combine them? And that's where we went. Well, our umbrella for Sibylla is love v career. That was always our guiding light. And so we thought, what if we applied that umbrella to the First Nations characters? And then we road tested our new drafts, which are obviously, lighter. They don't have that the traumatic history. None of that is in the show. But it's not because we didn't know it existed, and it's not because we just left it out because we didn't think it was something that we wanted. It was more like what we've created with all of these stories is, I think, and I think you reflect that, is we wanted to bring stories of joy and independence and these young women making their own lives and making their own decisions. So when we applied that to a First Nations story, we also wanted a story that had no trauma attached to it on purpose, so that Aboriginal people, all First Nations people, everyone can watch this show, and it's a safe space. It's a safe space for everyone. It's about romance and career, and that's the story we told.
I've not even asked about Sibylla yet because you always have so much to say and I love it. So with Sibylla's story, I'd be interested to know a quick overview of the choice to age her up, because in the book she's 16, 17, and in the show she's being called a spinster. And what you were looking for that helped you to decide on Philippa. She's phenomenal in this.
She's a 19/20-year-old spinster in our show, just to be certain. We didn't actually age her up that much, but I don't think we ever exactly say how old she was, but in our minds, that character was 1920. That was an early decision as well, because we feel like that there's so many similarities for, like, we thought a 16-year-old colonial woman has kind of similar problems to more like a 19, 20-year-old contemporary woman. So we aged her up for that reason. So, and also it's a bit creepy, a 16, 17-year-old talking about marriage in contemporary times. It was creepy, the whole sort of thing. So we thought we'll age her up so that for a contemporary audience, all these romances make sense and aren't creepy. But I think, people are different. Oh, Philippa Northeast is our total joy. We couldn't be more thrilled with her performance, and like literally the search for Sibylla is a big one. She's an iconic character. She's an iconic Australian historical character. But the moment we saw Pip's audition tape, we knew her already, obviously. She's an actress in Australia who actually has a lot of experience, and we all knew her as a person and as an actor. But we saw her audition tape, and it was just like, she's the one. It was the same actually with Chris Chung for Harry Beecham. Both of them. It was like they sent in a tape and they were both like, okay, there they are. I'm trying for shorter answers now.
Yes, no, and I appreciate it because I have so many questions and I didn't know you would have this much to say, but I do love it. Like I love that you have so much to say because it shows how passionate you are
I
about,
love this
and that
show.
comes across in how good the series is. So, in
Mm.
following up a bit on the points you made about the ostracization that a lot of these characters experience because of things like being a woman, being a person of color, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I found interesting is that the great equalizer for all of those people is that it always goes back to economics, the endless worries about money, financial security, even with a character like Augusta, where she's this bold personality, but then she's encouraging Harry to marry for financial security. That to me feels like something that can connect really well with a modern audience because of how bad economic inequality is now. So, was
Yeah.
that a connective thread that was something you were aware of while mapping out the
Yeah,
story?
absolutely. That was definitely and a really quick, simple answer to that one is that the class system in Australia, I think, is similar to America. It's more about money than it is about class. So our class system is economic. And so that whole have and have not is really interesting. And I think there's a lot of story in the original book about poverty and wealth and where that puts you in society. So definitely that was a consideration when we were writing the scripts.
And one of the things that I loved about the series compared to the book is how funny the show is. I love comedy. I think comedy is a very underappreciated genre. What inspired how you created the show's comedic tone and voice? I mean, it's not funny the entire time, but there is a lot
Hmm.
of humor. So, how did you create that dimension of the story?
That was always a guiding principle. We wanted joy in the show. Joy is a really big word for us. I love that character in the book, but she's very down on herself when you read the book. She's very kind of, angry and upset. And when you've got an actor like Pip, but then you also have Anna Chancellor and you have Genevieve O'Reilly and you have all, Kate. Oh my God, my favorite character who plays Augusta. Like these are funny people. And so you write to them and they're funny. And the show has just got joy. And joy, as I said, joy was our guiding light. And so that's where we went with that. That's why there's comedy in it.
Okay, final quick question because I have to wrap.
Yeah,
What do
I
you hope the
know.
viewers will take away from watching My Brilliant Career?
Look, I hope they take the same thing that I took away from when I read the book as a child and then when I saw the film, is that sometimes the choices that you make, particularly as a woman, are are difficult and they're not the easiest choice. But the choice that you make that is the truest to yourself is the best choice to make for your future. that was complicated. Like, make the brave choice, see where it leads you. Don't just take what the world gives you and accepts it, you know, like get out there, be brave and be bold.
Well, thank you so much again, and congratulations. I cannot emphasize enough how much I enjoyed this. I mean, just from start to finish, it was a total revelation of like, oh my God, I found a good one. This isn't just like, oh, it's
Um,
another thing I'm reviewing. I'm like, I really enjoyed this.
oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, that's all we wanted. We wanted people to just love it and to, you know, take it in as their thing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And can I just say, when the sisters, when they were having their conversation, and you have one sister finding out that her sister's dating a cop, the first thing in my mind went, oh no, you can't trust him, he's a cop. And then her sister says, you can't trust him, he's a cop. Or I went, oh, it's my show, it's my people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will just say quickly that scene with the feather is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. It's so beautiful. We had to wait for exactly the right time of day to shoot it, like, and you know, I think it's my favorite engagement scene in the show.
I was very
It's
emotional every time those
the
two were together.
music,
Yeah.
the score, everything. It's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you again, and congratulations and all the
Lovely
best.
to meet you. Thank
Yeah, lovely
you.
to meet you as
Okay.
well.